Happy Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to today's daily Bible reading. It is January 18th, and we are in Isaiah chapter 18. This is our last reading where we will just be in Isaiah, because tomorrow on the 19th, we're going to be picking up in Luke chapter 1 as well. So we'll be reading Isaiah chapter 19 as well as Luke chapter 1. Isaiah 19 and Luke chapter 1 tomorrow. But again, today we are looking at Isaiah chapter 18, which continues this string of pronouncements and speeches against the various nations around the known world at this time, and the historical context of those who had power during the time of Isaiah. And we're going to see the nation of Cush being under examination today for their sins and their rebellion against God. Now, whenever we think about Cush, we need to understand historically, this would have been a nation that would have had power that extended into Egypt and Ethiopia as well. There were some Cushite kings who actually served as pharaohs within Egypt. So this is whenever we read in verse number 2, specifically where it talks about them being a feared people, a powerful nation. That's what we need to think of them having power, not just within a particular space that we might think of as Cush, but understanding that power was very far reaching throughout the world at that time. It was a vast space of land that they would have been able to exert their power, again, even into Egypt and Ethiopia at certain points within history. So that's what we're reading today. We're looking at the pronouncement against Cush, and then that's going to be expanded upon somewhat as Egypt is mentioned tomorrow whenever we read chapter 19. So let's get into the text then here in Isaiah chapter 18 and read it together. Isaiah 18, beginning in verse number 1, the Lord's message to Cush. Isaiah 18 and verse number 1, woe to the land of buzzing insect wings beyond the rivers of Cush, which sends envoys by sea and reed vessels over the water. Go, swift messengers, to a nation tall and smooth-skinned, to a people feared far and near, a powerful nation with a strange language, whose land is divided by rivers. All you inhabitants of the world, and you who live on the earth, when a banner is raised on the mountains, look. When a ram's horn sounds, listen. For the Lord said to me, I will quietly look out from my place, like shimmering heat in sunshine, like a rain cloud in harvest heat. For before the harvest, when the blossoming is over and the blossom becomes a ripening grape, he will cut off the shoots with a pruning knife and tear away and remove the branches. They will all be left for the birds of prey on the hills and for the wild animals of the land. The birds of prey will spend the summer feeding on them, and all the wild animals the winter. At that time, a gift will be brought to the Lord of armies from a people tall and smooth-skinned, a people feared far and near, a powerful nation with a strange language, whose land is divided by rivers, to Mount Zion, the place of the Lord, the place of the name of the Lord of armies. Again, we have a pronouncement here against Cush that makes sense for their people. Notice everything that's mentioned here, just the insects. We think about a river system with all the insects that are present there, and the fact that is described as a place that is divided by rivers. We know the Nile River and the massive expanse that it covers. And here is the Lord saying, listen, I'm going to cut you off just like anything else. There's going to be judgment against you too. And we know that Cush, being a pagan nation, was rebellious against God, and they're not going to be spared from this judgment that's coming upon the land as well. And yet, here's the thing: at the end of verse number 7, at the end of this text in verse number 7, notice that there is going to be, after this takes place, there's going to be tribute brought to God. There's going to be tribute brought to God, because eventually the Cushites are going to bow down just like everyone else. They're going to recognize the power of God, and that really lets us know that God is in charge. God is in charge, even against a nation that is described as powerful and mighty, that's feared far and near. It does not matter whenever it comes to the power of God. His power is overwhelming. His power cannot be matched. Anyone who stands against him will be overcome. And we've seen that as we've gone throughout these chapters, going all the way back to the fall of Babylon in chapter 14. Let's see here. We can go all the way back. Here we go. Go all the way back to chapter 10, whenever the judgment on Assyria is first mentioned. We go from Assyria to Babylon. And then from Babylon, we have Moab and Philistia. Assyria mentioned once again. We have Aram mentioned here, Cush, and even Israel yesterday in our reading mentioned with Aram because of the alliance that was present between them. Anyone who stands against God, anyone who rebels, anyone who does not submit to him as king, will be brought down. And really, this part of this, I don't think we can lay the blame entirely, because you can only control so much. But remember that it was Israel's job. It was the United Kingdom of Israel's job, going back to Exodus, to be a light to the nations. They were to draw the nations closer to God. And though they could not control the nations and force them to do so, I think what we see here is partly a failure of them to do that. That instead of being a holy people set apart from the nations around them, which was to show them the right way to live in subjection to God, they, instead of being different, often assimilated to the nations around them. And because of that, we see these nations really seeing no reason to change and to submit and bow down to God. And because of that, here comes judgment. So God is not judging these nations without having given them an opportunity to do what was necessary. No, they were at least were supposed to have heard from Israel concerning Yahweh and him being the one true living God. And yet they didn't. They did not listen. They did not submit. And for that, we see the punishment being handed down in this section here of Isaiah, where all these different nations are being judged for their rebellion. And that's the lesson for us. If we do not submit to God, then we too will suffer. We will suffer punishment for that. And you think about this going forward, thinking about the return of Jesus, how every knee will bow then. Just as Cush is going to give tribute to God because they recognize God's power, so everyone at the end is going to bow down as well. But I would much rather there be for us a desire to humbly bow down to the Lord instead of being forced to bow down in defeat. So today, as we go throughout our day, I hope that each of us make the choice to humbly submit ourselves to God and not put God in a position where he has to force us to do so. Let us all humbly submit before the Lord. He is in charge. He is all powerful. And it's just better. It's just better to live in service to God. Thanks for joining in today, though, and hope you do have a great rest of your day. Join in tomorrow again as we not only continue in Isaiah chapter 19,